All right, welcome to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions. Today we are talking about balancing care and confidentiality, mental health in a digital world. And I'd like to welcome today's guest, Hillary. Hillary, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me. My name is Hillary Hess. I have a small private practice in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I specialize in treating anxiety, depression, and trauma-related, stress-related disorders. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
All right, well, glad to have you. So we'll jump right into today's topic. So in your practice, how do you balance the deeply personal, the human side of therapy with the growing reliance on technology and digital tools in mental health care?
That's a good question because technology is advancing rapidly. I think a good amount of people come in looking for a balance in their engagement with technology, social media, and things like that, and their real lived personal lives. So, in the context of my business, I try to keep it very, I don't know, close to the chest, I guess. So people come in, I do virtual sessions, but a lot of people do prefer in person. I think people are seeking more personal connection and face-to-face relationships. So I hold space and then hope to attract people who are looking to kind of move a little bit slower and recognize the fast-paced nature of technology um, and the digital world, and they're looking for more of a balance in that.
Okay. So I want to also ask because I've had a lot of people lately talk about AI and how they're using that within their various practices. Is that something you've explored, or kind of what's your thought on how AI may help shape the future of patient care?
Yeah, I think ethically, it's a challenging question. For me, I look at it from an ethical perspective, and AI's function of gathering information. So, I don't know, like the nature of my work, I really value people's personal stories and the sharing of their story. Like, I honor their trust in me and sharing their story. So, I have not really integrated AI. There is options to use AI for note taking, which is would be helpful for me. And I've kind of explored the confidentiality aspect of that. For example, I have one client who does work a little bit with AI, and I mentioned how AI is coming into the therapeutic space. And they immediately were like, "Well, I don't give you permission to use AI for these sessions," and they're virtual sessions. So it's challenging. I'm just very aware of it and recognize that people's stories are very personal, and it's helpful for me to record and maybe have technology summarize all of that. But I think first and foremost, I want to honor my clients. And so if they're not on board with that, then we keep it pretty old school. I haven't tipped into that yet, but I recognize it's there and I'm moving very slowly.
Okay, I just like to ask because like I said, I've heard many talk about it. Some have jumped like all into it, and others, are kind of like, no, we'll never do it. And then others are kind of sound like we're kind of where you're at, kind of in between. It would be helpful, but from a patient side, there's a lot of concern about that. So
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who I liked the way she described it. She was like, "I'm not saying that AI would be," and this is using AI as like a therapist replacement, sort of. They're like, "I'm not saying that they are better than a human therapist. I'm just saying I could ask them a question and they have like a vast pool, like our library of information and statistics and things to pull from, and then provide sort of more of like objective feedback." And I think that as a therapist, that can be helpful, but also like a core piece of how I work is recognizing that not everything works for everyone, and everyone's life stories and situations are very nuanced and different. So what works for one person may not work for another person. And so even if you are using AI in that capacity, I think it's helpful to have someone guide you to integrating that feedback in a way that is appropriate in your life, or, kind of helping you build the bridges to make that feedback work or applicable in your life. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, I appreciate that. So, want to kind of transition a little bit, get more into your business background. So, can you start by telling us a bit more about your practice and what inspired you to basically start your own practice?
So, let me see. I worked for a community mental health agency right out of grad school. I finished grad school in 2013, and um, there was a lot of paperwork, a lot of policies and procedures, which are necessary. And I was happy to learn those baseline skills in practicing, but I felt like a lot of that institutional aspect was taking over my ability to really connect and work with the clients and do that therapeutic work. So, I went into private practice while I also worked with some group practices. And so I kind of did it part time for a while. And then when COVID hit, I went into it full time. I think the space is important for me, and the environment is influential, I think, in creating a certain environment where people can come in and feel like not necessarily that they're at home, but it's like a neutral space, non judgmental, where they can share their story, share their worries, their stresses, and then sort of leave that space and go back into their lives, try to apply some skills from there. But I really look at my private practice as like a holding space for whatever people want to bring. And it gives them a break, a space to really focus on those issues that they're carrying with them day to day and try to work through them so that it's not trickling into their day to day as frequently. So it's sort of like there's this therapeutic strategy I learned, I think, with kids a long time ago, where they could come in and they could write down all their worries or the things that are on their mind, and you'd put them in a bag and then maybe pull them out and talk about them a little bit, but they could leave that in the office when they go out the door, or they could choose to take certain things with them. I don't know. I like focusing on the client, and working in a larger institution creates a lot of noise around that.
So, I know right now many mental health practices are evolving rapidly. What changes have you seen in how counseling services are delivered, especially since starting your own business?
What changes have I seen in how counseling services are being delivered? Yeah, I agree. I think that it's changing rapidly. I think working in this field, that's maybe a pretty complex question. So one way I would look at that is when I completed grad school, the program I went to was cognitive behavior therapy based, so CBT, and that was, and maybe to some degree still is, kind of like the golden child method of therapy, because it is known to be evidence based, because you can break down symptoms and behaviors into measurable entities that you can see the change, like this behavior is reduced or this behavior increases, and you can measure the change. So insurance companies really like that. I like that strategy. I like CBT because it provides a clear structure, um, to kind of break up aspects of how we think, how we feel, and how we behave in situations. And it helps to make therapy a little bit more manageable for clients in particular, too. But that's like a talk therapy. Maybe there's worksheets involved. It's a little bit intellectual based. And I've always been someone that values the mind body connection and more integrative approaches. So I've sought out further education in like mindfulness and yoga or like somatic work, and more recently, psychedelic assisted therapy. So over the course of time, I've seen a trend not only just in my work, but just more people seem interested in these alternative therapy modalities, more movement based, being in nature, walk and talk, yoga therapy, and then like integrating medicine, even like psychedelic medicine, but even in that work, somatic and movement is very important because I don't know, our memories are stored in our muscles. And a big aspect of the mind body work is recognizing that your body doesn't know the difference between a perceived threat and something that is physically present and a threat. So if you perceive something to be a threat, your body kind of orients for fight or flight, or begins to. And then we hold that tension in our muscles. And if we don't take time to check in and identify that we are safe, and like let go of that stress, we are physically safe, it can build up and create other problems. So I really value the mind body work, movement, yoga, breath work, kind of those approaches. And they seem to be, people seem to seek those out more and be more open to those methods.
Yeah, I would agree because I've noticed that a lot with even, others I've spoken with. I've seen to be coming across more of that. I've met someone who does dance therapy as their practice. So I do see that more, and I do see how that would be very useful based on some of the activities I've done in my past. And like when you mentioned muscle memory, it triggered a lot in my mind, remembering of those activities because it was all a muscle memory and you didn't have to think about the activity. But I do appreciate
Right.
the insight.
Yeah.
I do find that very interesting.
Like people who experience trauma, that shock stress response is like also muscle memory to a degree. I mean, trauma memories get stored in a different part of the brain. So sometimes your body will remember and react before your mind recognizes what's happening, whether it's like a loud sound or a smell or something like that. And therapy, part of the work is retraining your brain to identify that you're no longer in that stressful state, but you are now safe. That was in the past and this is now. So it really is integrative. It really is like mind and body and tuning in to what you're feeling sensory wise, emotionally, and also like recognizing what's around you. That's where I pull in mindfulness based strategies.
All right. And what do you enjoy most about working with your clients or running your own practice?
Well, I enjoy making my own schedule. That's a plus. And I enjoy my clients. I really like my clients. And I hope they like me too. Sometimes they say they do. But yeah, I enjoy learning. I'm curious about people. And like I said, I really honor and value their stories. So, when they have an insight or practice a skill, or they put the pieces together and even kind of problem solve or identify new resources for themselves, and I can watch their mood shift or just consistency build and new ways of doing things for themselves. I really enjoy that. I just enjoy watching the growth, um, and kind of reinforcing the positive changes that people are making for themselves in their lives. Because I really believe that when we feel better, we live better, we express more. That's so like the direction is going more towards just being more of ourselves and putting that out into the world as part of the community. And then we can all build together and like increase quality of life kind of thing.
All right, I like it. So transitioning a bit as we kind of get towards, the end here. Wanted to get more into some of the potential initiatives that you have going on in your practice. So, are there currently any new programs or initiatives, or even directions you're currently focused on with your practice?
Yeah, so since I've completed the psychedelic-assisted therapy certification. I've partnered with another practice in doing ketamine therapy. Since I'm in PA, that's the only kind of psychoactive medicine that is legal currently in the therapeutic space. Integrating that more into my practice, expanding a little bit because I do like the integrative therapies, and sometimes it's hard to work all of that into one office space. So I'm currently looking at expanding to have more space to do yoga in its own space, more talk therapy in one space, and then like journey work or the ketamine work sort of in another space. So that when people come in, they can orient to what they are coming in for, whether it's more movement based or art based, journey work, or just talk therapy. But I'm moving in the direction of integrating therapy more as like a lifestyle and supportive products to the therapeutic process that might be like after you have a challenging session. I can recommend that you go home and maybe have some tea or like detox tea, or when the season changes, our body sort of also needs to adjust to that. So, like offering maybe Epsom salts after a challenging session. A lot of this relates to the psychedelic work. When you're going deep into the deeper trauma work, you need to recover from that. And you need to take time and space, and it can be helpful to have self care, nourishing items that can help you recenter once you leave the therapeutic space. You come into the office and it's conducive for all that work you're doing. But when you go home, are you just re entering into a stressful environment or something that's reinforcing all of the patterns that you're trying to change? And so, helping people bring more therapeutic aspects of life, therapeutic products, ways of living, slowing down, like calming methods into their personal space so that you can access self help skills readily at home. And I want to help people recognize that that is accessible. Therapy and healing doesn't have to be really all behind closed doors, but a lot of it is about like community and connection. So, the more we can integrate that into our day to day lives within our community and support each other, the better. And so that's sort of that's a long-term initiative kind of goal of mine, but I have been working on building some inventory on specific products like maybe aromatherapy type oils, like I said, some Epsom salts, maybe some teas and things like that to help people integrate that experience of calm and grounding and healing in their day to day, and not only when they're coming into the office.
That sounds great. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of options for patients down the road to meet whatever needs or desires they have. It sounds like.
That's the hope. Yeah, like I said, not everything works for everyone. And so in the mental health realm, this is what I've seen. A lot of it has been helpful for me in my own healing and journey. And so that's what I feel like I can offer. And then like nutrition is really important. I don't do much of that, but I know what works for me. But having a nutritionist might help. Coaches are also helpful because they're a little bit more hands on. But yeah, giving people options, I think, is important.
It sounds like it'll be a pretty phenomenal thing as you continue to develop.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome. So as we kind of wrap up here, just got one final question. Kind of want to tie back a little bit to what we touched on in the beginning. We had a little bit around the technology and the digital aspect, and I know a lot of the counseling and client communication can be in the digital realm these days, happen digitally. How do you ensure that your client's personal and health information is staying private and secure?
Well, I work on secure networks, and like I use HIPAA compliant platforms. I keep things like in my office and I don't talk about their information outside of when it's necessary. And even for like insurance, I try to keep my notes relevant to what insurance is asking for. A lot of it has to do with like methods and modalities that are used. But yeah, like I said, I try to keep that space when people are coming into the office as like a container, and what people share doesn't really leave that container, or bits and pieces may for like insurance, or if there's releases involved to share with other people. I think like on my end, I can do what I can do to keep things private, and then on the client's end, it's kind of on them as far as if there's other people within earshot or how they maintain privacy. That is something that comes up with like virtual sessions. Sometimes it's challenging to have those sessions when there's other people in the house or around. So, like in my office space, there's sound machines or there's things to ensure more privacy. Really, I just focus on what I can do with what I have and what I know. And I'm selective about what I share.
Well, I appreciate all your insights today. I just want to see if there's any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience.
I think we've kind of covered a bunch of different things. I think that the digital world is having an impact on people in general and on healthcare. And as people engage with technology, that they can be thoughtful in how they do that and be mindful that it is hard to maintain confidentiality. And so if you're putting something out there, there's a risk that it could go beyond, just where you're having that conversation right now. And so to be choice with what you share, and in the therapeutic sense, I like I said, I move slow. In person is good. Creating a container is important. And however people feel safe in doing that for themselves and the choices that they make, then I support them in that.
All right. Well, Hillary, I appreciate you taking the time today to come on and speak. And if anyone would like more information or would like to reach out, we'll have all the contact information in the description below this video.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.